Jake Paul says Conor needs him now more than Jake needs Conor, right? Conor needs Jake more than Jake needs Conor. Is he right? Is Jake Paul right? Now, a number of months ago, absolutely not. As recently as a week ago, probably not. Jake Paul's a big star with what he does. And you have a guy in Conor who hasn't won a fight in 3 years. You have a guy in Paul who hasn't had a fight in 3 years. Am I right, and do any of you agree with me? Probably you don't. I did a sports science. Have you guys ever seen that? Sports science? I don't know that it's still on TV. It used to be on, and I used to even watch it. And basically what they would do, at least the day that I was there, Houston Alexander, you guys remember him? Myself, King Mo, we go out and we go to a school, a junior high, but they had a beautiful football field. Like the nicest junior high football field you've ever seen. Turf, built-in stands, beautiful track. All right. So this is going to be used for the set for sports science. So we go out there. Christoph was with us. So it's those four guys. Christoph, Alexander, King Mo, Chael P. We go to the football field, and they bring in a pro football player, and he's a running back. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the ball out of his arms. That's it. He's going to run past us. We're going to take the ball, showing force, showing athleticism, whatever thing they were doing for sports science. The sports science show was anything but science, but it did have a sports element, and it was a lot of fun to watch. And I only bring that to you because not only did we fail to take the football, but when I was there, class was out. Class was out. So as we're all walking, right, to film the show, we got cameras with us, and the kids can kind of look around and know who's who. They knew who this running back was, local guy from a pro team in their area. I want to say it was the Rams. Then you got some fighters, right? And we ended up visiting with some kids. The kids were telling us how great Kimbo Slice was. And I remember when they told me, I remember my very first reaction was to laugh. I laughed. And this was Elite XC days, before Strike Force, Elite XC. And Kimbo had just fought over the recent weekend. He'd thrown a punch. He knocked some tomato can out. And so when the kid said it to me, I laughed. I thought everybody was in on the gag. Kimbo's a big, good-looking, marketable guy. He's fighting complete bums. They're putting it on television. I learned this from this school kid. And by the way, when I say kid, there's about 5 of them and 3 were talking. The other 2 were just there. They're informing me, well, Kimbo's great. I just saw him one. He knocked a guy out with 1 punch. It was a 30-second fight, and they were dead serious. And that's when oh my gosh, these kids aren't kidding. I live so close to the trees, I don't see the forest. I see that he's a big, marketable, good-looking, got the beard, a lot of muscles. I know the guy he's fighting is a can who's never been on TV before. I know that the promoter's a dirtbag that set the whole thing. Right, Gary Shaw. I know the whole thing. I didn't know they didn't know. I'm too close to it. Everybody I talk to knows. All the sites I go to, everybody knows. We all knew what this was. We all knew that this was entertainment. The kids didn't know. So I bring that to you because when I'm telling you that Paul hasn't had a fight in 3 years, does anybody agree with me? How could they? They saw Paul knock out a basketball guy that won a slam dunk contest, and that was in less than 3 years. So apparently Chael doesn't know what he's talking about. Interesting. Okay. So when you live in this sense of reality, it starts to get you a little closer to Paul being correct. Now, this is all make-believe land as it is, and Conor McGregor and Conor McGregor's ego and Conor McGregor's popularity is going to take a bruise for 2 weeks. And by the way, the clock has already started. So any of you dancing on Conor's grave, continue to dance. I'm just letting you know that music ends 14 days from the day it started, and you're already 11 days in. It just doesn't go that way. These things just don't stick. What's different about Conor now? Well, he lost to Dustin Poirier. Yeah, he lost to Dustin Poirier last year on Fight Island. I'm asking you what's different now. Well, he hasn't won a fight in 5 years. He had won a fight in 5 years before this fight with Dustin Poirier. What's different now? Well, Conor's got a whole bunch of money. He's got more money now. I'm asking you, what is different now? What in the hell is different now? Nothing. I'll answer the question. It's just fresh in your mind. It just happens to be fresh in your mind. You think Conor's never put a Band-Aid on a loss before? You think Conor's never been down and had to get back up? You think Conor's name wasn't smeared in the mud and he had to make it great again? He lost an ass-whipping contest. He came back from beating up an old drunk man in his hometown bar. Like, what part of this do you think that Conor hasn't overcome and that he's not going to overcome yet again? I'm only asking you the question. Because for Paul to be right, it would mean that Paul's name is bigger than Conor's now. That might have been true before. I don't know. That Paul, and he's a YouTube star and all that, I don't really know. How big is that? I hear it's pretty big. I know when Paul fought Askren, there was no live crowd, but the numbers coming out of people that watched, it was a massive number. I know that it was a big enough number that Showtime, a real network, signed him. So I'm just sharing with you, it appears that what we have with Paul is a very real phenomenon. And I don't know that it's success in athletics based. I don't know that it is. And I'm not looking to smear what he did with Ben or put down Nate Robinson at all. Just looking at it objectively, saying, well, we haven't really seen a whole lot of fighting from this guy. That's true. You then look at Conor, well, we haven't seen a whole lot of successful fighting from this guy. But again, we can all agree the phenomenon is very real. And I think as we live in this very short term, we got to use history as the greatest trajectory to the future. You think that Conor can't overcome losing to Dustin? Do you really think that? Because he already lost to him. I mean, do you see where that argument's a problem? You think we're Conor saying some mean things about a woman over a microphone who's 26 feet away? You think that was a scummy move? He beat up a drunk, toothless man in his hometown. What here presents a challenge or a unique position that Conor hasn't seen himself in before and overcome. And if you're enjoying dancing on his grave, I'm telling you, keep the beer flowing. Crank that stereo up. Because you got about 5 or 6 days before that record comes to an end. It's a sign of success to Conor that he's been able to keep his name out here as long as he has, doing nothing. There was 22 athletes on that card. One of them is being talked about. The other 20 aren't. Have you thought about it in that perspective? Oh, and by the way, somebody beat Conor. Even he is not being talked about as much as McGregor. 22 athletes fought that night. Who was in the co-main event? All right, you got it. It took you a second, but you got it. What interview have you seen him do since? Who was in the co-main event who lost? What interview have you seen him do since? What headlines have they made since? And that's normal. That's not a knock to anybody. But there is a compliment here going on to the guy who got his ass kicked again. And there's a little bit of a PR mess that he's going to work himself through again. So who needs who? I think it's a fun conversation. Paul is not small. That phenomenon is real. I encourage you to start enjoying it. Paul versus Woodley, we're going to have a fun buildup. We're going to have an interesting match that might surprise us. Woodley goes out there and smashes Paul. That's going to surprise a lot of you that drank the Kool-Aid. Paul goes out there and stops Woodley. I think that's going to surprise a lot of, I mean, you're going to have some fun that if you're missing it or you're turning your shoulder to, you're going to miss out on a good time. I encourage you not to. To think that Conor is in some kind of a rut because he lost to Poirier. He'd already lost to Poirier. He already lost to Poirier. Think Conor's got himself in a PR mess? He talked about Jolie into a microphone. Not great. In the world of the PR messes that he's found himself in, something tells me he'll get out of this just fine.